You know that friend who used to be unstoppable? The one who was first to volunteer, last to leave, always had a plan, always had energy, always made everything look effortless. The one people counted on without asking. The one who never said no. Not because they didn't want to, but because somewhere along the way, they confused being needed with being worthy. Yeah, that friend isn't lazy now. They're not flaky. They're not suddenly a different person. They're burnt out, and they're protecting what's left. If you're someone who used to give everything and now struggles to give anything, welcome. You're about to feel something you probably haven't felt in a long time. Understood. Today, we're breaking down the psychology of people who burn out, the ones society calls weak, but science calls something else entirely. Here's the thing. Burnout isn't about working hard. Everyone works hard. Burnout is what happens when a person gives everything they have, emotionally, mentally, physically, without ever being given permission to stop. Their energy doesn't just run low, it collapses. And the recovery isn't a weekend. It's a process that the hustle culture was never honest enough to prepare you for. Psychologists call this allostatic overload, when the cumulative stress on the mind and body exceeds its capacity to recover. It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's not a personal failing dressed up in medical language. It's a nervous system that finally hit its biological limit after being pushed past it for longer than any nervous system was designed to sustain. And here's the part that should change the way you see the burnout psychology entirely. The people who burn out aren't the ones who cared too little. They're almost always the ones who cared too much. The ones who held everything together so consistently, so quietly, so completely, that nobody around them ever thought to ask if they were okay. Because people who burn out don't look like they're struggling. They look like they're thriving. Right up until the moment they're not. But there's more going on beneath the surface of burnout psychology than just stress and overwork. People who burn out aren't random. They share a specific, identifiable psychological profile. They're the ones who said yes when they meant no, who stayed when they needed to leave, who performed strength so convincingly for so long that the performance became the only version of themselves they knew how to be. Psychologists call this emotional labor, the invisible, exhausting work of managing your own feelings in order to meet the emotional demands of everyone around you. And for the burnout psychology, emotional labor isn't occasional. It's constant. It's the baseline. It's what they do before the actual work even starts. For high achievers and empathetic people, burnout isn't a risk. It's almost inevitable. Because the same traits that make them exceptional, the conscientiousness, the deep sense of responsibility, the inability to do anything halfway, are the exact traits that make it impossible to stop before the damage is done. They don't burn out despite their strengths. They burn out because of them. Here's where the psychology gets fascinating. For years, burnout was treated as an emotional problem, a stress management issue, something that therapy and vacation could fix if the person was willing to slow down and take better care of themselves. That framing was incomplete, because burnout isn't just psychological, it's neurological. And the research that proves it is one of the most important and least discussed findings in modern psychology. Here's the fact that should genuinely stop you. Studies show that burnout physically alters the brain. Research from Uppsala University found that chronic burnout reduces cortical thickness in areas of the brain responsible for attention, emotional regulation, and decision-making. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps you think clearly, regulate your emotions, and make sound decisions, literally shrinks under the sustained pressure of unresolved burnout. Burnout doesn't just feel like losing yourself. Neurologically, it actually is. And it gets more important. A study published in the journal Psychotherapy and Psychosomatics found that burnout produces changes in the brain that are nearly identical to those found in people with clinical depression: altered stress hormone levels, disrupted sleep architecture, and measurable reductions in the brain's ability to experience reward and motivation. In other words, the burnout psychology isn't a mindset problem, it's a biological state. And telling someone in that state to just push through it is like telling someone with a broken leg to walk it off. Now, here's the part where I want to step outside the psychology for a moment and just talk to you directly. Because I know what burnout feels like from the inside. Not the clinical version, the lived version. The version where you wake up tired after 8 hours of sleep. Where you sit down to do the thing you used to love and feel absolutely nothing. Where the people who need you keep showing up and you keep showing up for them, performing okay, performing fine, performing functional, while privately wondering if the person you used to be is ever coming back. That feeling isn't weakness. That is the burnout psychology's defining symptom, and it has a name. Psychologists call it depersonalization, a quiet disconnection from yourself, your work, and your sense of meaning that descends so gradually you don't notice it's happening until you're already on the other side of it. Most people assume burnout feels dramatic, like a breakdown, like a moment. It doesn't. It feels like fading, like slowly becoming a version of yourself that goes through the motions without really being there. And the most painful part? The burnout psychology almost never happens to people who didn't care. It happens to the ones who cared the most, the ones who gave the most, the ones who held the most for the longest time without ever being held themselves. And let's be honest, society romanticizes the grind, the hustle culture, the sleep when you're dead mentality, the badges of honor worn by people who work the longest, sleep the least, and perform the most. The LinkedIn posts celebrating 60-hour weeks. The cultural mythology that equates exhaustion with ambition and rest with laziness. But what the grind culture never tells you is what happens after, what it costs, what it quietly takes from the people who buy into it completely. Not just their energy, but their identity, their relationships, their ability to feel joy in the things that used to matter. The burnout psychology isn't a failure of discipline. It's the predictable outcome of a culture that monetizes overcommitment and calls it success. Your competition was never the person who outworked you. Your competition is the version of you that almost accepted exhaustion as a permanent personality trait. Now, honesty matters here. Some people burn out for a deeper reason. Not just overwork, but a life built entirely around external validation, around being needed, around an identity so completely fused with productivity that rest feels like failure and stillness feels like disappearing. For them, burnout becomes both a breakdown and an unavoidable reckoning. So it's worth asking honestly, did you burn out because you worked too hard? Or because you never believed you were enough without the work? Because one is a recovery, the other is a transformation, and only you know which one is actually true right now. But for those who are genuinely in the rebuilding, the ones learning to rest without guilt, to set limits without shame, to exist without performing, they're not giving up. They're finally giving back to themselves. They find restoration in small things: a slow morning, a meal they actually tasted, a conversation that didn't cost them anything, a moment of stillness that didn't immediately feel like wasted time. Things the grind culture called indulgent, but psychology calls essential. Psychologists call this parasympathetic recovery, the nervous system's return to a state of safety after prolonged threat. And for the burnout psychology, this isn't self-care. It isn't optional. It isn't a reward for finishing everything on the list. It's survival. So if you're someone who used to have more and now has less energy, less motivation, less of the person you used to recognize in the mirror, you're not broken. You're not behind. You're not weak. You're depleted. And there is a profound, life-changing difference between the two. Broken means it's permanent. Depleted means it's asking for something you've spent years refusing to give yourself. Rest, without earning it first, without justifying it, without performing recovery the same way you performed everything else. Just rest. Psychologists call the path back burnout recovery psychology. On Mentor Psychology, we call it coming home to yourself. You gave everything to everything else. It's time to give something back to you. Tell me, have you experienced burnout, or do you know someone who has? Drop it in the comments. This community was built for exactly that conversation. If this video found you at the right moment, subscribe, because the next video goes even deeper into the psychology of people who were built to give. And if this one resonated, that one is going to hit harder. Click it. You'll understand why.